These strange and bizarre events always became worse and more intense in the dark. Another thing the Gutierrez family soon noticed was that certain rooms in the house had more strange occurrences. One of those places was the bathroom opposite Estefania's room. One day, Estefania went into the bathroom to change her clothes, but the moment she stepped inside, she started screaming and calling for her mother, Concepcion. When Concepcion entered the bathroom, Estefania told her that she had seen some ghosts in the room and that the light had turned on by itself. Concepcion tried to calm Estefania down and said, "It's okay. I'm here. Nothing bad is going to happen to you." But at that exact moment, the bathroom door closed and locked by itself, and both Estefania and Concepcion started screaming and calling for the rest of the family. Maximo heard his wife and daughter's screams and came to the bathroom door. He told Concepcion and Estefania not to panic and to step away from the door. He was going to break it down and go inside. But just as he stepped back a little to throw his full weight against the door, the bathroom door suddenly opened by itself, and Maximo saw Estefania and Concepcion hugging each other tightly, terrified. Just like he had told them, they had stepped away from the door. The Gutierrez family weren't the only ones who could talk about the strange and bizarre events happening in their home. Neighbors and guests who had visited the Gutierrez family also had very strange experiences. One day, a friend of the Gutierrez family came over for a gathering, and they were all sitting together in the living room. Every family member was in the living room at that moment. But suddenly, a strange object was thrown toward the guests' feet, and no one could tell where it had come from or who had thrown it, because the guest could see every member of the family in front of them, and none of them had thrown the object. Some other guests and neighbors also saw the shadowy figures Estefania had spoken of inside the Gutierrez home. The events in that house were becoming more dangerous and frightening day by day. For example, one day Concepcion was sitting at the kitchen table with one of her sons when, completely out of nowhere, a glass cup was thrown toward the boy's head. But fortunately, the boy was quick enough to dodge, and after he moved his head out of the cup's path, the glass shattered mid-air in front of Concepcion and her son, without hitting anything. Estefania began saying very dark and frightening things to her family members. She told Concepcion, "When I die, I don't want any of my paternal relatives to attend my funeral." She also asked Concepcion to bury her body with a photo of her father. She spoke in a way that made it seem like she knew she was going to die soon. Even though she was only 17 or 18 years old and had been suffering from these bizarre events ever since she was 16. She told her mother, "If you don't do what I said, I'll come back after my death and make sure you can't eat or sleep. You've been warned." One day, Estefania's boyfriend, a boy named Dimitri, came over to the Gutierrez home. The atmosphere was friendly and warm. Dimitri told the family, "This is a really great place to sit and socialize. Invite more guests." After that, Estefania, Dimitri, and a few of Estefania's siblings decided to play with the Ouija board. Dimitri didn't believe at all in what Estefania and her siblings were saying about the Ouija board being real and allowing you to communicate with spirits. He even laughed a bit at what they said, because he thought they were exaggerating. Estefania said, "Okay, let's try it. Let's bring out the Ouija board and try to talk to the spirits in this house." Dimitri said, "Sure, why not?" When Estefania and Dimitri started asking questions from the spirit they had summoned, Estefania's condition visibly worsened. Dimitri, thinking it was all a joke, casually said, "Okay, tell this spirit to do whatever it wants to me and leave you alone." And at that very moment, something strange happened. Dimitri suddenly fainted and collapsed to the ground. His body was trembling, his eyes had rolled back, and he wasn't responding to any sounds or to what was going on around him. All the family members were worried and kept calling Dimitri's name. They tried to wake him up, but nothing worked. Eventually, Concepcion had to slap him, but even that didn't help. Dimitri remained unconscious and in a terrifying state. Concepcion, worried, called the emergency services. She didn't want to be solely responsible for whatever might happen to Dimitri. A little while later, 2 police officers arrived, along with an ambulance at the Gutierrez family's home. But when they entered the house, they were faced with a strange scene. Dimitri suddenly began attacking the police officers. He was hitting both officers with full force, and everyone realized this was no longer the same Dimitri. It seemed like a superhuman force had taken over him. The officers, terrified, tied his hands and feet. But even after being restrained, Dimitri continued struggling to attack them. One of the officers fearfully told Dimitri, "Look, even if you manage to free your hands and feet, I'm probably so scared I might shoot you in the head. So you better not try anything." Meanwhile, one of the Gutierrez family's neighbors, who was also a priest, heard the noise from inside the house and came in to see what was going on. When he saw Dimitri, he immediately said, "This boy is possessed." In the end, they took Dimitri to the hospital. After a few hours, he slowly returned to normal and became the same boy as before. But what everyone found really strange was that Dimitri had no memory at all of what had happened after they began using the Ouija board. Dimitri told the police, "I don't remember any of these things you say happened. The last thing I remember is telling that spirit we summoned to do whatever it wants to me instead of Estefania. And the last thing I recall is the flame of the candle stretching up toward the ceiling." We reached the summer of 1991. Estefania had just turned 18 and had been suffering from these supernatural events for more than a year. One day, Estefania and Mariela were sitting next to each other watching TV when Estefania suddenly, without warning, attacked Mariela. Mariela quickly managed to free herself from Estefania. At that very moment, Estefania fell to the ground and began to have a seizure. Estefania had become completely motionless, her eyes were rolled back, and she was unresponsive to anything. And this episode lasted longer than ever before. All the family members gathered around Estefania and were praying for her to wake up. And Estefania did wake up. She was feeling very well and said she had no pain and no memory of what had happened before the seizure. And for the rest of the day, she felt great, as if she had returned to being the old Estefania. And her family. That day, Estefania went outside for a walk and then came back home earlier than usual and told her family, "I had a really good day today. I spent a lot of energy, so I'm sorry. I can't sit with you any longer. I want to go rest." As very happy about it, because it seemed like the old Estefania had returned. The next day, Estefania had another very severe seizure, but this time, she never regained consciousness. Estefania's family did everything they could to bring their daughter back, but she wouldn't wake up. So at midnight, they took Estefania to the hospital. Unfortunately, Estefania passed away at 2 a.m. The doctors were very suspicious about Estefania's death because an 18-year-old girl with no documented medical problems had died so suddenly. They received permission to perform an autopsy on Estefania's body, and after the autopsy, the doctors said, "We still don't know what caused Estefania's death." Some doctors said Estefania most likely died due to suffocation and lack of oxygen to her body. But that alone couldn't fully explain her death. In Estefania's home, they also found the same medication that the previous doctor had prescribed for her, but the amount of the drug was very small, exactly the dose the doctor had prescribed, and that medication alone couldn't have caused her death either. 24 hours after Estefania's death, exactly at 2 a.m., the Gutierrez family heard knocking on the door, and Concepcion was sure that Estefania's spirit had returned. After Estefania's death, all the things happening to the Gutierrez family became worse. The family heard knocking sounds around the clock, footsteps inside the house, and laughter. And all these things got worse at 11:30 p.m. exactly the time the Gutierrez family had taken Estefania to the hospital. Interestingly, Maximo didn't believe in any of the supernatural events happening in their home. He said there was a logical explanation for everything they were experiencing, and he wanted to prove it to his wife and children. That's why he installed motion sensors all over the apartment, to prove to his family that nothing strange was happening in the house. One night, the sensor in the living room went off, and Maximo came out to see what had triggered the alarm. But when he got to the living room, he saw no one there, and this kept happening repeatedly. One of the sensors in a completely random part of the house would go off. Maximo would go there, but he could find no physical evidence of why the sensor had been triggered. After Estefania's death, the focus of the supernatural forces shifted to Concepcion. Concepcion told the other family members, "I feel a very cold hand on my hands and legs at totally random moments during the day. I hear Estefania's laughter. Sometimes I hear her screaming. And most of the time, these sounds came from the bathroom." Scratch and claw marks appeared on the doors and walls of the house, and all the red crosses that had been nailed to the walls and couldn't possibly move on their own began to move. The shadows that Estefania used to see were now walking around the house, and many of the family members could see those shadows. Every morning, Estefania's bed was messy, as if someone had slept in it during the night, even though all the family members said none of them had gone near Estefania's bed the night before. And they always heard tapping and footsteps coming from her room. When they went inside the room to see who was walking around, they would find the whole room in chaos. One night, the family heard the terrifying laughter of an old man coming from the living room. And after hearing that same voice several more times, they concluded that it belonged to the one who was tormenting them, their grandfather's spirit. The children told Maximo and Concepcion that at night, invisible hands would pull them out of bed and throw them to the floor. The younger kids had even been thrown against doors and walls. And after the kids kept complaining about the things that were happening to them during sleep, Maximo decided that all the family members should bring their mattresses and sleep together in the living room so they could better watch over each other. When everyone gathered their pillows, blankets, and belongings and came to the living room to sleep beside one another, Maximo decided that to help his family feel more at ease, he would close the living room doors and place something behind them so everyone could feel assured that no one else was in the room besides themselves. Maximo moved one of the large and heavy sofas in the living room. He pushed it with effort and placed it behind the main door of the living room. Then he straightened up and felt very reassured, thinking that from then on, nothing strange would happen to the kids. He thought that if he could help the family feel safer, these things they were seeing and experiencing would eventually go away. But at that very moment, the window opened and a very strong wind blew through the living room, and all the doors that Maximo had closed flew open. Every family member had seen these ghosts or spirit-like figures at least once in the house, and according to all of them, these ghosts wore long cloaks. They even seemed to be priests or some kind of religious figures because their clothes resembled the outfits the kids had seen in old books and on TV. After some time, the Gutierrez family decided to make their story public. They thought that by publicizing their story, perhaps some experts or people who understood these matters would come forward to help them. One of those people was a man named Tristan Baker. Tristan Baker claimed to be a specialist in supernatural phenomena, and after visiting the Gutierrez home, he said the bathroom was a portal between two worlds. After Tristan told the family this, Maximo decided to lock up and chain the bathroom so that no ghost could come out from there anymore. Tristan gained the family's trust, especially Concepcion's, and after a while he said, "Okay, I've cleansed your house. No more strange things will happen here." Then, without the Gutierrez family's permission, he aired all his research on one of Spain's news networks. After Tristan broadcast his research on a news channel, a medium contacted the family and said, "I read about what happened to your family, and I've done some research as well. And based on the powers and abilities I have, I can confidently tell you that the one tormenting you is your grandfather's spirit. And Estefania's spirit is now trying to protect you. She's trying to fight her grandfather. And an audio recording was made in the Gutierrez family's house, in which a girl's voice can be heard. The voice says, "Be careful, grandfather." And then Tristan tells the Gutierrez family that a demon named Estagfer Krap Pula is tormenting them. Unlike Maximo, Concepcion was certain that all these events happening to their family were supernatural and had no logical explanation. Before going to bed, Concepcion would sprinkle flour on the floors of rooms where she knew there would be no movement during the night. And the next day, they found the imprint of a man's boot in the flour. Maximo said it wasn't him, and none of the children had men's boots like that. Also, one time, the Gutierrez family decided to go on a trip. Before leaving the house, Concepcion locked all the doors using a set of metal wires, and when they returned, they saw all the wires had been cut. In November 1992, Mariela and one of her sisters experienced one of the scariest events that had ever happened to the Gutierrez family. Mariela and her sister woke up in the middle of the night and looked around to see what had caused both of them to wake up at the same time. Then they realized that a faceless ghost was crawling on the floor toward their beds, and the closer it got, all the furniture and items in its path were being thrown against the walls and doors. Mariela and her sister tried to turn on one of the lamps beside their beds, but their hands were shaking so much they couldn't find the switch. Eventually, Mariela managed to turn on one of the bedside lamps, and when they looked back toward the ghost, they saw that it had disappeared. On November 19th, 1992, the same ghost returned. And this time, the entire family saw it crawling on the floor down one of the hallways in their home. After seeing this ghost, the whole family decided, no, this is too much. So they all ran toward the front door because everyone wanted to leave the apartment. No one wanted to stay there anymore. But when they opened the front door, they saw a ball coming toward them. Maximo said, "Great, now a ball is coming at us too," and angrily threw the ball across the street. But the ball, without hitting anything, rolled back toward them. Around 1:30 or 2 a.m. that same night, Maximo and the rest of the family, who had gathered outside the apartment and no longer wanted to go back inside, called the police. Maximo said over the phone to the police, "Please come here as soon as possible, it's here." The operator speaking to Maximo thought he was drunk, so she said, "Put your wife on the phone." After Concepcion repeated Maximo's story over the phone, the operator said, "Please put your children on the phone." But the children also confirmed their parents' story, and the operator said, "Okay, we're sending a few officers to the address you gave. Stay right where you are." A police team led by Jose Negri was dispatched to the Gutierrez family's house. That night, the weather was very cold and it was raining. When the police team arrived at the apartment door, they saw the entire Gutierrez family gathered outside in the cold and rain, and they absolutely refused to go back inside. 3 of the officers eventually managed to convince Maximo and one of the Gutierrez sons to come inside with them and show them around the house. The rest of the officers waited outside with Concepcion and the other children. The police searched the house and found nothing strange. They returned outside to Concepcion and the children and said, "We searched the whole house. There's no one here, and nothing unusual is happening." Concepcion told them, "You were only inside the apartment for 5 minutes. Of course you didn't see anything. But based on my experience, strange events always get worse in the dark." The police told her, "Okay, we'll turn off the lights and see what happens." And the moment they turned off the lights, they heard knocking and footsteps from all over the house. One of the officers got scared, quickly turned the lights back on, and looked around at everyone in the room. He saw that all the family members were still standing exactly where they had been before the lights went off. No one had moved. Then they heard screams coming from several different parts of the house. But when they followed the sound and reached the room the screams had come from, they found no one inside. When they returned to the living room, they saw something strange. A substance that looked like slime smeared on the table next to the telephone. Before leaving the room, they hadn't seen anything on the table. The officers could see that this plasma-like material was fresh, meaning it had appeared in the short time they were gone from the room. But since they were so frightened, they didn't take a sample. They had no physical evidence of it, only all of them saying, "Yes, we saw something like that." While the officers were talking to the family in the living room, a closet door suddenly opened by itself. All the officers turned toward it. One of them even drew his weapon and pointed it at the closet, thinking someone might come out, maybe the person who had been tormenting the family. But when they went to the closet, they saw that no one was there. Negri examined all the furniture and surroundings near the closet and said there was no logical or physical reason for the door to open on its own. 4 of the officers who were at the scene said, "Okay, we don't want to be in this apartment anymore. We're going outside and waiting for you there." But Negri and the rest of the officers stayed inside the apartment and searched around some more. At that moment, they heard a very loud and piercing sound coming from Estefania's room, a crucifix that had been nailed to the wall in Estefania's room, rotated and then tore off the wall and was thrown to the middle of the room, right in front of everyone who was in the room. When the Gutierrez family told the police that all the strange events were worse in the bathroom than anywhere else in the house, the police went there to see if they could finally find the source of the disturbances. The moment they entered the bathroom, the temperature dropped several degrees. They were all cold, and they could clearly feel that there was a strange force in that room, a force they couldn't explain. At 3 a.m., about an hour after the police had arrived at the Gutierrez home, Negri called the same operator who had answered the family's call and said, "I have no explanation for the events that have taken place inside this apartment. There are strange things happening in this house that make my hair stand on end, but I don't know what it is. I don't know where it's coming from, and I don't know how to explain it." And for the first time in his professional career, Negri submitted an official report to the police station in which he spoke about supernatural events. 2 of the people who went to the Gutierrez family's house during this time to investigate were Iker Jimenez and Lorenzo Fernandez Bueno. These 2, along with their producers, went into the house in 1996 to make a television program about it. They didn't experience anything strange in the house until they entered the bathroom. One strange thing that happened to them was that the moment they stepped inside the bathroom, the batteries in their cameras dropped from 100 to 0. Another team placed a voice recorder inside the apartment and captured 2 voices. One of the voices was male and the other female. The voices were telling the investigators, "Get out of here." Finally, in October 1996, all the strange and bizarre events that had happened in the house up to that point suddenly stopped. These bizarre events didn't just stop randomly and without reason. For the first time after Estefania's death, her body was exhumed from the grave. Interestingly, Estefania's mother had not followed her daughter's request to be buried with a photo of her father, and she had buried Estefania without the photo. But when, after 5 years, Estefania's body was exhumed and reburied, Concepcion decided to fulfill her daughter's wish, and this time buried her with a photo of her father. And after that, all the strange events that had been happening to the Gutierrez family stopped. After that, the Gutierrez family moved out of the house, and another family moved in. Interestingly, after this move, neither the Gutierrez family nor any of the other families who later lived in that house experienced any strange events. In 2006, the Gutierrez family gave an interview to a television network, and when the editors were editing the interview, they heard a strange sound in the background. They put on their headphones, raised the background volume, and heard a very strange voice saying, "We haven't even started yet."